The flick kicks off right after World War II. This guy, Sergeant Paul Sutton, finally comes home. All he's looking for is to settle down and start a family with his wife Betty, who he married real quick right before shipping out. He's all pumped up, searching for her face in the big happy crowd welcoming the soldiers back. But nope, not a glimpse. Everyone else is having these super sweet reunions, and Paul's just standing there, totally on his own. That's when it hits him. Betty didn't even bother to show. He hauls his butt over to their old apartment, clutching the locket with her picture in it. He walks into the place, and it's a ghost town. Suddenly, Betty pops out, wearing only her lingerie. She acts all shocked he's there, swearing she had no clue he was rolling back, even though he wrote her every single day for 4 years while he was deployed. She cops to not reading them because they were full of gnarly battle descriptions, but she saved them all, sealed up. Paul's gutted, man. Writing those letters was his lifeline, his way of hanging on. He swallows his feelings, though, and lets it slide. Betty immediately pivots, talking all about the economic boom and how he needs to get his old job back, pronto. Paul's not feeling the chocolate sales anymore. He's dreaming about that family life he wrote about in all those letters Betty never opened. But Betty's laser focused on making bank, really pressuring him to go back to sales so they can have a better life. He caves in, reluctantly. Then they have a big, passionate makeup session. Next morning, Paul's back on the grind, selling his chocolates in Sacramento. On the train, he tries to help a young woman whose suitcase tumbles, sending her stuff flying, including a shattered, framed photo of her and her dad. As he's helping her pick up the pieces, they have this super awkward fumble, and the poor girl barfs right on his uniform. He just shrugs it off, cleans up the mess, and doesn't even balk at the accident. What a guy. Paul keeps having these war flashbacks, and he finally wakes up on the train. The woman from before is gone. He grabs a bus towards Sacramento and runs into her again. Turns out, they mixed up their tickets by accident. She introduces herself as Victoria Aragon, a grad student heading back to her family's vineyard. On the bus, these two drunken jerks start harassing Victoria. Paul jumps in, they have a brawl, and all three of them get kicked off. Paul keeps walking, and he finds Victoria and all her luggage stranded on the side of the road. Here's the kicker. Victoria's pregnant. She's terrified to face her dad, thinking he'll disown her for coming home without a husband. The professor who knocked her up? He ditched her. Paul, being the stand-up guy he is, offers to pretend to be her husband for a bit, just to save her from the shame. He makes it crystal clear he's already married, and this is a one-night-only deal. Victoria agrees, but she's wary. They finally get to her family's vineyard, Las Nubes. Paul, thinking fast, improvises wedding rings using chocolate wrappers. Victoria's father, Alberto, takes one look at Paul and flips out when he hears Paul is her husband. The whole household staff rushes over cause of the commotion, but they totally welcome Victoria home, despite the tense vibe. Victoria announces their marriage, which shocks the family and enrages Alberto, especially when he finds out Paul's a chocolate salesman. The women, Marie and Guadalupe, try to smooth things over with some hospitality, and Don Pedro is super welcoming to Paul. At dinner, Alberto grills Paul, then trashes him for being an orphan, claiming he's unfit to marry Victoria because he has no past to stack up against the family's heritage. Paul just takes the abuse and excuses himself. Victoria apologizes, and Paul seems to get why Alberto's so mad. Cause of their little charade, they get offered Victoria's parents' bedroom. But Paul, ever the gentleman, sleeps on the floor out of respect. Alberto's suspicious of Paul and Victoria. He sneaks into their room and notices the blanket on the floor. To keep up the ruse, Paul and Victoria decide to share the bed, and yeah, there's some romantic tension there. Paul has a nightmare that wakes up Victoria, but before anything happens, bells start ringing. It's a frost warning! The whole family rushes out to save the grapevines. Victoria shows Paul the ropes, and Alberto keeps watching them from afar. Once the vines are safe, Paul is set to peace out, but Don Pedro takes him on a walk, talking about the vineyard's history and basically suggesting Paul could find a home there if he wanted one. Paul's feeling like an Aragon now, but he still plans to leave. Don Pedro tells him that Alberto totally saw Paul leaving and that Victoria would be heartbroken. To protect her, Paul decides to hang around for one more day. It's harvest day, and Victoria's brother Pedro comes home from Stanford. The family and the workers are all out picking grapes, laughing and singing. Paul starts copying Alberto's technique, and they get into a friendly contest. The day turns into a huge party with music, and the women, including Victoria, start crushing grapes in a big vat. Paul and Victoria get pushed into the vat together and share this super surprising and passionate kiss. But Paul cuts it off fast, confessing his love, but insisting on his commitment to his marriage. Victoria is crushed. Paul spends the night on the sofa, tormented by his moral dilemma. Next morning, he wakes up to Pedro and Alberto bickering about modernizing the winery. Paul suggests bank loans, but Alberto blows him off, questioning if Paul and Victoria's marriage is even real. Paul stands up for himself, saying Victoria's well-being is his business. As Paul's getting ready to split, Victoria has stomach pain, but she refuses his offer to stay. Paul confronts Alberto, questioning his love for Victoria after Alberto claims Paul will never own the winery. Victoria joins the fight, fed up with Alberto's controlling ways and his hate for Paul. Alberto defends himself, but Victoria seriously thinks about leaving home. Later, Don Pedro gets Paul to drink some brandy, and they're soon drunk and singing a Latin song. Don Pablo encourages Paul to serenade Victoria with a mariachi band. Paul's singing is so heartfelt it moves everyone, even Alberto, who starts to rethink his harsh judgment. They wait for Victoria's signal of acceptance, a lit bedroom lamp, but the window stays dark after the song. Paul starts to walk away, pauses, and then decides he has to leave because of his sense of duty. He ends up at the Harvest Festival, where Victoria and her family are at the wine blessing. Alberto totally shocks Paul by introducing him to Father Couturier as his son-in-law and announcing a wedding that evening. Paul confronts a stunned Victoria, who agrees they need to tell the truth. He gives her his Bronze Star medal for their child. Victoria then confesses to Alberto about her pregnancy and that there is no husband. While the family is trying to process this bombshell, Paul quietly slips out of the celebration. He hitchhikes to Florida and has a nightmare where he, Victoria, and their child are caught in an explosion, and he wakes up, sweating. Paul shows up at Betty's apartment and catches her in bed with another dude. Betty tells Paul she's already filed for an annulment and needs him to sign the papers, cause she doesn't want the life he wants. Paul leaves, dazed at first, but then he's pumped at the thought of finally being free to go back to Victoria. He hitchhikes back to Napa and finds Alberto drinking with his crew. Paul wakes him up and asks for permission to marry Victoria and raise her kid. Alberto is livid and reminds Paul he's a married man, even after Paul shows him the annulment papers. Alberto still demands his gun. Still barehanded, he tries to brawl with Paul, who dodges his swings easy peasy. In the scuffle, an oil lamp Alberto hurls at Paul misses and sets the edges of the vineyard on fire. The fire spreads like crazy, and soon the whole field is ablaze. Paul acts fast, dousing his jacket in water and trying to fight the fire. The whole family and workers show up immediately, including Victoria, who shrugs off her shock to join Paul in trying to stop the blaze. Everyone's scrambling to save what they can. Pedro, who joined the effort, catches his clothes on fire and freaks out. Amidst the screams, Paul soaks his own clothes in a barrel, sprints toward the heat where Pedro is, wraps him in the wet cloth and smothers the flames on his legs. Alberto, who was initially frozen by shock and regret, suddenly charges into the burning rose until Don Pedro has to drag him back. The fire wipes out Las Nubes, leaving behind a scene of total destruction. The Aragons and their workers are mourning the loss of their homes and livelihoods. They think the ancient vine, the root of their identity, is toast. But Paul, with that can-do attitude, heads to the hill and digs up the blackened root. Even though it's charred, he brings it to Alberto, hoping there's still life inside. An older guy, who was pretty hostile before, finds a surviving core inside the burnt bark, and hope explodes back into the community. Alberto, who was just furious a minute ago, finally recognizes Paul's bravery and goodness. As a sign of newfound trust, Alberto offers Paul a piece of the living root to replant, welcoming him as family to help rebuild their heritage and livelihood. In a quiet moment, right after this discovery, Paul proposes to Victoria. They seal the deal with a kiss as the community cheers, remembering the priest's blessing. The musicians have nothing left to play. The fields are bare, but hope is less of a feeling and more of an action. The deliberate, slow work of planting what's left and tending it patiently until new growth pops up. The movie wraps up with Paul, the orphan who came home from war feeling like he had nothing but a promise he couldn't keep, now living the dreams he wrote about in his letters, with a new family at Las Nubes. That's the whole scoop. Smash that like and subscribe to support us. See ya in the next recap.